Dhirubhai created an investor movement, and from that sink of Indians, they thought this wasn't possible for them. For 121 and a poor man's fabric, and he rebrands it as a modern, most important part, he made it cheap. Not because it was more efficient, but computers were basically theoretical back then. But the founder understood. November 1977. Dhirubhai Ambani was standing outside the Bombay Stock Exchange, and the brokers inside were laughing at him. He is a textile mill owner, scrappy, no inherited wealth, not even from a business family. And he just told them that he is going to do something that has literally never been done in the history of India before. He is going to ask regular Indians, people who earn like 200 rupees a month, to invest in his company. The brokers laughed. Nobody will do it. Indians don't buy shares. That's for British companies. That's for trust. You're a mill owner. You will remain a mill owner. And 2 years later, Reliance Industries had 58,000 shareholders. 58,000 shareholders. In a country where most people have never ever heard the word equity before, Dhirubhai created an investor movement. And from that single decision, not to maximize per share value, but to democratize ownership, everything that followed was built. And this is not a story about a smart guy. This is a story about influence, real influence, the kind that doesn't come from Instagram or YouTube or some book, the kind that builds empires. And here's what nobody in India is talking about. The greatest businesses in the Indian history were not built on products. They were not built on technology. They were built on one invisible architecture that Dhirubhai understood, that Jamsetji Tata understood, that Ramdev understood, and that I have watched modern founders completely miss out on. I've spent 8 years in inside clinics watching doctors burn lakhs and lakhs on ads just to buy their way into market dominance. And I've watched them fail not because the clinics weren't good, because they didn't understand how real influence actually worked. Now let me show you. 1903. Jamsetji Tata is getting ready to leave for England. He is the founder of India's first major business conglomerate, and he has been denied entry to Watson's Hotel in Bombay. Why? Because he's an Indian. The hotel policy was no Indians are allowed. Now Jamsetji Tata was already rich. He could have gone to London, he could have forgotten about it, but instead he made a promise to his wife. I will build a hotel that will be the most magnificent in the world. It will be in Bombay, and it will prove that Indians can create institutions as grand as anything that the Britishers could ever build. And that hotel became the Taj Hotel. And here is the part that nobody understood about influence. The Taj Hotel was not built to make money. It was built to shift a belief that lived in the mindset of millions of Indians. They thought this wasn't possible for them. For 121 years, the Taj Hotel has been India's most trusted institution, not because of luxury. There are way other much more luxurious hotels, but because it was built on a story that Indians related with. Indians built that as a response to humiliation that India was going through from centuries. It was built as proof of India, and that is influence. Now, about 3 years ago, I was sitting with a dermatologist in Bandra who had spent about 8 lakhs rupees on Instagram ads. They were trying to convince people that the clinic were trustworthy and the conversion rate was 0.2%. I asked him, why should I believe that your clinic is good? He said, I have great technology, machines from Germany. I said, okay, so isn't that the same thing that the clinic next door claims? And the one after that? Why should I believe you? And then he couldn't answer because he didn't understand that trust is not sold through advertising. Trust is built through a narrative that people believe in. Trust is built when you prove something about yourself that costs you something real. When you invest something that can't be taken back. Jamsetji didn't just say, come to my hotel. He built the hotel because he was angry, because he had something to prove. And people felt that. They have been believing it for 121 years now. Now let's look at the polyester revolution. Let's go back to Dhirubhai, 1957. India's government has just announced a 5-year plan that is supposed to make India self-sufficient. Very intellectual, very noble, but very pointless for most Indians. Dhirubhai is working in, he was working in Aden at this point, trading petroleum products, and he sees something that nobody else in India is seeing. Indians were in need of polyester saris, not because they were fashionable, but because they were practical. Indian women had just two choices: cotton saris that wrinkle, or silk saris that only the rich women could afford. Dhirubhai saw a third choice. He comes back to India, he starts a polyester yarn business, and here's where the influence architecture begins. He doesn't just make good polyester, he does something much smarter. He takes polyester, which was seen as cheap, artificial, and a poor man's fabric, and he rebrands it as a modern, progressive, and as the future of saris. He sponsored fashion shows, he created a narrative that polyester is what modern India wears. Not cotton, not because cotton is worse, but because polyester represents something. It represents progress, democracy, access, and then this is the part that Dhirubhai understood that his competitors never could. He didn't sell polyester to rich people. He sold it to everyone. He made it cheap enough that a housewife who got 300 rupee a month can buy a sari. And that is the moment when Dhirubhai's real genius shows up. Because now he doesn't have customers, he has believers. He has 5 million Indian women who feel like they're part of something modern just by wearing the polyester sari. And fast forward to 1977, those 5 million women became 5 million potential shareholders because they already believed in the vision of Dhirubhai. They owned a piece of the story. They just didn't own the piece of company yet. Then he goes to Bombay Stock Exchange and says, I am going to ask regular Indians to buy my shares, and it was not crazy. It was inevitable. He had already won the trust, right? Then I watched a hair transplant clinic do this actually. Wrong clinic, wrong approach. They spent 3 years building a social media presence, 50,000 Instagram followers, and then they launched a product line, supplements, hair care stuff, and it flopped miserably. There's a clinic in Indiranagar that did something smarter. They didn't try to sell products, they created a community. They hosted monthly sessions where people could come in, talk about hair loss, and not just as a medical problem, but as something that was messing up their personal lives and confidence. And for the first time, there was a place where men felt like they could talk about it without shame. And that clinic didn't have thousands of Instagram followers, they had thousands of believers. And those believers didn't just come in for hair transplants, they came in with their friends. They came in because they felt like a part of something better. They finally felt like they're in a place which actually understood them. And that clinic's referral rate is 67%. Not because the surgery is better, there are much more experienced doctors out there. This was because the doctor built a much better narrative. Now let's talk about the yogi who became a 10,000 crore rupee estate. This is a tricky one. Ramdev, who started Patanjali, is not a traditional business owner. He is a yoga teacher. He has no corporate background, no inherited wealth, but in 8 years, he built a 10,000 crore FMCG empire. How? He understood something about modern India that MNCs didn't see coming. He understood that there was a deep, almost unconscious distress of multinationals in the Indian's mind. A feeling that foreign companies were taking from India, not giving to India. Ramdev didn't compete on quality, he competed on belonging. He made FMCG products like toothpaste, shampoo, oil, and then wrapped them in the narrative that this is Indian, this is Ayurvedic, this is for Indians. And the most important part, he made it cheap. Not because it was more efficient, but because the price was part of the narrative. They are not trying to get rich off you. We are trying to make India strong. Now, was this narrative exaggerated? Oh, absolutely. Was the Ayurvedic side sometimes loose? Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is that Ramdev understood that people don't buy toothpaste. They buy a story about themselves. They buy a belief about whether the company cares about India or just profits from India. The MNCs that spent 50 years trying to sell quality, Ramdev sold belonging and won. The mistake people make when they look at Patanjali is thinking it was about the product. It never was. It was about understanding what people believed and then building a company around that belief. Now, what nobody tells you about real influence is this, and I've realized after 15 years of watching very close influence across the world, real influence is not built through frequency. It is not built through posting every day. It is not even built through being good at your thing. It is built through creating a proof point that costs you something real. Jamsetji Tata could have built a small profitable hotel in Bombay, but instead he built something that required decades of investments, and that proved something about Indian capability, and that meant that he had to be personally committed to excellence forever. That cost created trust. Dhirubhai could have kept Reliance as a private company, keeping all the wealth for himself, but he democratized ownership. That generosity with risk that created loyalty. He made his customers a shareholder and made them feel like they had a skin in the game. Ramdev could have positioned Patanjali as premium, but he positioned it as accessible. That choice to leave money on the table, that created belief forever. Last month, I was walking through a cosmetic surgery clinic in Bangalore. The founder had about 1 lakh Instagram followers. Beautiful posts, lots of testimonials, lots of before after photos, professional, slick. Yet he was struggling to get patients. I asked him, "What's your story? Why should someone trust you instead of the clinic next to you?" He said, "I'm trained in America. My clinic is state of the art. I have done 5,000 surgeries." I said, "Okay, so isn't that what the clinic next door and the next door to that also says? What's special about you?" And here's what he told me. "I started this clinic because my mother had a botched surgery at another clinic. And then I decided to build something that no mother would ever feel that pain again." That story is worth 1 million Instagram followers, but he wasn't telling it. He was telling the technical story, the certifications, the machines. So I said, stop posting these before afters. Start telling that story more. Tell the story of your mother. Tell the story of why you are obsessed with patient safety. Make your clinic about that narrative, not about the procedure, and that is how you're gonna win. He looked at me like I was some crazy guy because he thought influence came from showing off the credentials. But influence comes from showing up, from being personally, vulnerably committed to something that scares you out. Now let's talk about the one thing that actually stays. The Bajaj family has been wealthy for 4 generations. 4 generations. In India, that's almost impossible. Most wealth gets diluted in 1 or 2 generations. Fights break out, the whole thing crumbles. So, how did the Bajaj wealth stay? It was not because they had better products, not because they were smarter than other business families. It was simply because they created an institutional story. Bajaj became synonymous with Indian pride, with durability, with the idea that you were choosing something made by people who cared. Asian Paints did something similar in 1954. While every other paint company was trying to make better paint, Asian Paints made a decision that nobody thought made sense. They invested in computers for inventory management. This was back in 1954. Computers were basically theoretical back then, but the founder understood something. The thing that would matter in the future was not the paint. It was the ability to have the right paint in the right store at the right time. It was the invisible architecture behind the business, not the business itself. And today, Asian Paint dominates the Indian market not because they make better paints. They dominate because they created a system, an invisible system that the competitors still couldn't copy. And that system is built on a decision that nobody else understood back then. This is the difference between a business that lasts 10-15 years and a business that lasts a lifetime. This is the difference between a brand and an institution. This is the difference between influence that evaporates and influence that compounds forever. So here's what I want you to understand. When you are building a business, you have a choice. You can compete on product, you can compete on price, you can compete on convenience. Those are all valid, but they are all tactical. They all can be copied. They all can be beaten. Or you can build an influence architecture. You can create a narrative that people believe in so deeply that it becomes invisible for them. It becomes the way they think about themselves, the way they think about your space, and the way they think about what actually matters. That takes longer, yes. It requires real commitment, yes. It requires you to prove something, and that has a cost to you. It requires a story. It requires you to be willing to be vulnerable. And here's what happens when you do it. You don't have customers anymore. You have a believer system. You don't have a brand. You have an institution. and you have gravity that pulls everything towards you. It pulls customers, it pulls investors, it pulls talents, opportunities. The businesses that built empires in India understood this. All of them, Dhirubhai, Jamsetji, Ramdev, all that flaws that he had, even Ramdev understood that the product didn't matter. It was the story that the product represented. Now most founders are, building products and just shooting in the dark for influence. The real ones are building influence and then focusing on product. That's not just a framework, that is the architecture behind every business that ever became something more than just a business. And if you're not building that, you're just building, in sand. I hope you liked the video. If you liked it, share with your friends. Maybe they would like to learn about all of these influence architectures in the future episodes as well. Ask them to subscribe, and if you do, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.